essentially, what I really am trying to wiggle my way toward is the very hard answer that none of it matters. None of what I just said matters if you can't articulate what you do. If you can't speak about what you do, you're done. You know, you have to be able to talk, make the argument, know your different audiences out there in the world, and have a way of talking to those different audiences. Yeah.
Sounds like the sciences and the arts both need to do that, because it seems like the running theme about collaboration, right, is understanding complements and contrasts and having respect for each other. It's interesting. It just seems to be a train that's running through all of it.
Well, I will say that when I was a writing professor for a little while, the two groups of students that had the hardest time were my artists and my engineers. Just had a really hard time with traditional human language. They were much better off in the abstract forms of communication, like mathematics or clay. Yeah.
So you mentioned programs like the 42 Hours Free Creativity. Have you tried making like a serious course? So like, I know every engineer has to take the senior design in order to graduate, so 1 semester of design course. I'm assuming our students have something similar to that. Have you tried melding the two to try and make like one interdisciplinary capstone project?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I mentioned earlier that we have these courses, UArts 150 and UArts 250, which are usually about half engineers, and the other half is from the other 3 schools up here, but predominantly art and design. So each of those classes are 80 people. So those classes do that, pretty hardcore actually. But we're just in the beginning process of creating other courses like that. So we're going to create a whole UArts suite here at the University of Michigan. There'll be a 350, which is targeted at doing the thing that I just complained that artists and engineers don't do very well. And I'm totally generalizing, so I apologize to you, you actual individuals, instead of these broad strokes that I'm painting with. This UArts 350 will be more about creative entrepreneurship and being able to talk about yourself and your work, whether, in the way that you execute visions, whether they're artistic or technological, and everything in between, especially the in-between. And then I also hope to have a like a 450 kind of class or some other offering that is at the intersections of art and health. Other questions? Yeah?
What does this mean for me on a personal level? I know this is a very selfish question, but like I said, I studied cellular and molecular biology here, had practically no art background or creative background. So, this move, you talked about this whole movement of the transdisciplinary, basically this whole lecture.
Yeah.
And, what does it mean for me? What can I expect if I were to go to graduate school, or if I'm looking at careers? What changes will I see that the previous generation of people in science like me didn't have before?
Well, I can't say that I know the trends of the molecular biology field, right? So that notwithstanding, I will say that it's amazing in a short, even in a long amount of time, how much changes and how much stays the same. And I should say that the transdisciplinary ethos is not evenly distributed from field to field to field to field to field. In fact, this intersection that this course and series represents is one of those places where it's still really exciting, because it's not like engineering and art and the arts, which have more making overlap. I mean, this is like, a well-established research field, biology, with its own, like, not that engineering isn't, but it at least appears on the surface that there's more distance, you know, on the surface. So what could you expect personally? Well, you know, I was talking to a really, let's say a really senior professor of political science at USC, and he was talking about how the generation of faculty younger than him, you know, he's like a chair or whatever, don't value his work at all, because he does work with film. He's a political scientist. He does work with film. He does work with cultural studies and English. He partners with those kinds of fields. And you know, he's sort of where political science maybe meets the arts and anthropology. And he's the chair. But about 15 years after he took his post at that university, they started hiring a bunch of people who were very quantitative political scientists, you know, like this is what I study and it's right here, you know, and they, like that's the norm, right? That's that whole generation. And now he's in a hiring position, right? Like the chair was above him, and he's hiring a bunch of people that work with film and anthropology and stuff like that. And then, you see what I'm saying? So it comes in these striations. And, you know, it's not exactly the same, but it rhymes, right? These leapfroggings. So you personally, I mean, I would say the kinds of ways that you can talk about yourself and the whole of your reality meaningfully, which may include some arts components, or at least the whatever drives you to be here, is something I would mention in your graduate school application. And then I would expect to get hardcore training in molecular and cellular biology. What else?
There's no question. I have like a last comment kind of related to the last question. I realize how, you know, these flexibilities and thought processes and being able to use multiple languages, it's very much emphasized during your undergraduate training, but as you go up the ladder into graduate school, doing a postdoc and becoming, you know, a professor before tenure, you're kind of constrained to this, in this way where you can't do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, it's a tenure track
Yes.
for a reason. Yeah.
I think, like it's part of our job, and you know, like the organization like HRU to actually emphasize this point to not to have them act upon, you know, not to have them to take any action per se, but to have an open mind so that when an opportunity arises from, you know, an artist or a scientist who may belong to him or her, that they just, you know, let it be instead of having, you know, you have to do this because I want to do this. So that's like what I kind of thought, like what I think that the significance of what we are doing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the I suffered, so you must suffer model is
Very strong.
it's very strong, and it's very I don't know. It's self-deleting in a sense, you know. The more that I research this, it becomes less and less necessary. Still prevalent though. All right. Well, thanks.